Last week, I finished with chapter 9 of 1 Corinthians, and it finished with these words: run this race. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in a way to get the prize. And we added chapters, verses, all that stuff, but we need to understand the original letter that Paul sends to the Corinth church. This all goes together, and so it goes right into chapter 10. So when we look at this, we want to run the race to win the prize. We want to finish well. There's several actually books and chapters and verses that say the similar language. We want to run this race well. One of them is 2 Timothy 4. It says this, 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. These verses that talk about finishing well, that's what we're after. That's what we're trying to do while we're here on this planet. It's so much bigger than what we make it sometimes. It's so much bigger than, just the normal day-to-day routine stuff that we're doing. It's about finishing this race that we're in, finishing it well, how God has called us to finish. So what Paul does next in 1 Corinthians is he tells this church, watch out. There's some things that are going to make you stumble along the way. And it's the same things that have made the church stumble for many, 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 many years. And then he goes all the way back and starts talking about the Israelites in the Exodus and how they were leaving Israel. He's saying, take these warnings, take heed, see exactly what they did wrong so that now this young church, this Corinth church, and even us today won't make those same mistakes. We know that's what he's saying because in verse 6 he says this: now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. So who's he talking about? Who is he trying to use as our lesson to help us not make these same mistakes? He's talking about the Israelites in Exodus as they are leaving and going into the promised land. He's talking and giving them these warnings. And they know these things because they have the Torah, their workbook, if you will. Their Bible at that time is the first 5 books of the Bible. They know these stories well. And he's saying these were put in here as warnings. This is for the ecclesia. This is for the body of believers, those who are going to be followers of Christ. All of this was put in here as a warning to keep you from making the same mistakes. So what's the warning that Paul tells us? Let's go and look at it. Exodus 13. Paul's talking about making sure that we don't make these same mistakes. So what are the mistakes they're making? They're in Sukkoth, and they are going up to Etham, and the Lord is leading them to the promised land. How is he leading them? In the day, he's putting this cloud in front of them. He's giving them this huge cloud to follow. I mean, it would be stunning to see that, but then at night, if they still want to travel, he puts up a pillar of fire. So imagine this. You are always wanting God to give you a sign. What if that sign was, God, I'm looking for some direction. You walk outside and there's a pillar of fire to lead you to the promised land. I mean, would you need anything else? That would be like, okay, God, I get it now. I understand. But what happens? Exodus 16. They've been traveling for 2 months. So they've had this sign for 2 months. That's how long it took them to start to complain. They start to grumble. The ecclesia, the church, started to grumble and complain after having this. And they told Moses and Aaron, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Basically what they're saying is, you know what? I wish we were back there where we were in slavery and it was terrible. It's better than this. That's what they're saying. And we always kind of say we want a sign from God. Well, here we go. Here's a sign from God. Surely it would be enough. And no, it wasn't. The people got hangry. They're hungry and they're angry. Hangry. So what does God do? Next miracle. He starts raining bread from the sky. This is real. This is actually going on. So they're waking up in the morning and they're going outside and bread is raining from the sky. I mean, would you need much more than that? You have direction, you've got fire in the sky, and now you have food in your belly. But no, they still get angry. We go on, Exodus 17. They're quarreling and they're mad, and they say to Moses, "Give us water to drink. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst?" I understand being thirsty. It's just the way they say it is like, why do you have to say it so mean? So God again answers them. He tells Moses, strike a rock. When he strikes that rock, water comes out for the people to drink. Another miracle, another amazing miracle. They're like, dude, you just hit that rock and water shot out at us. It's this amazing moment. Paul says, kind of interesting about this same thing. He says this back in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 3. They all ate the same spiritual food, because they're getting it from God. They all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Now, this would have been a new revelation to say that. That rock was Christ. What's he getting at here? The idea, the concept that the Old Testament doesn't have Christ in it. Some people believe you have God and then Jesus comes on the scene in the New Testament. No, you just have to know where you're looking because he's everywhere. He's all over the entire Bible, which is really important because where Paul is leading us to is the Old Testament is full of warnings for the modern day church. That's what he's leading us to. He's saying Christ is in all of these stories and they missed it. Don't miss it. Don't miss what the warnings were. In fact, John does the same thing. John chapter 1, verse 1 starts it with, "In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning." Who? Who is he talking about? John expands. He keeps going in chapter 1. He says in verse 9, "We're told this is the true light that gives light to everyone in the world." What do you mean, John? Verse 12. "We are told everyone who receives him gives the right to become children of God." So if you're connected to this light, you can become a child of God. What do you mean, John? Verse 14. "We are told this word we are speaking about became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." He's leaving no doubt this word who was there from the very beginning is Jesus Christ. In fact, him saying in the beginning is to connect them to the book they know, the Torah, because theirs started in the beginning. He's trying to put it all together and say this entire story is about Jesus Christ. That's what John's doing, and now that's what Paul's doing. It's all relevant to your life right now. When you're reading the Old Testament and the warnings, it's relevant to where you are right now. So go back to the spiritual food and drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. What's interesting about this word rock, the word they're using here, the original language and the rabbinical tradition, they said this rock that they spoke of in Exodus was a rock that they carried with them. So they first hit it to produce water, carry it with them, and the same word is used for the next location where Moses does it again. And so they said, okay, this rock must be a rock that they carry with them. That's the tradition anyway. And then it uses the word Petros, which is a word that means a rock small enough to carry. And then in Paul, when he's talking about it in 1 Corinthians, he switches that word rock from Petros to Petra. Petra is a mountain of rock. You might be familiar with the area. It's a mountain of rock. And what he's getting at, the point is he's saying that rock that they carried with them that gave them the sustaining life through water was actually Jesus Christ. And for us, that rock is even bigger because now that rock dwells in us as a mountain of rock. And instead of just water, it gives us sustaining life for eternity. He's saying a lot with one word right there. So he's really pushing into, they had Jesus, they just didn't understand what it was. They had life, they had this rock that they're carrying with them. They have Jesus, life-sustaining, living water, and they're walking with it, but now he's dwelling in you as a mountain of rock. Finish the race well. What's going to stop you from that? What are the warnings that he's saying? Now, here's what's going to mess you up, because they had a mountain rock, Jesus Christ. They had a cloud in the sky. They had a pillar of fire at night. They had bread raining down. They had little quail flying low enough for them to eat meat. They had it. Every miracle you possibly could ever pray for, they have it. They're seeing it. They're watching it with their eyes. So surely they're not going to make a mistake and move away from this incredible God, blessing them over and over and over again. Well, yeah, that is exactly what happened. Paul says this in verse 5, nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, and their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. You know what happens? They never stop complaining. They never stop grumbling. And God says, all right, and he waits 40 years and says, I'll just take the next generation in. That is such a warning. I'm not going to get specific, but that is such a warning. If you just continue to complain and complain and complain. What he did with them is he said, all right, fine, be what you want to be. I'll wait for the next generation and I'll do it with them. That's a warning. Verse 7 says, this back in 1 Corinthians, do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and got up to indulge in revelry, which is a really nice way of saying there was a big orgy, just so you know. The next verse 8 says this, we should not commit sexual immorality. That's why he's saying this, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 of them died. We should not test Christ, as some of them did, and then were killed by snakes. These are all stories throughout Exodus. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and then were killed by the destroying angel. All stories you can read about in Exodus. So let's go through them. The first one, idolatry. What is that? What is he talking about? Idolatry has to do with worshiping false idols. Now, we think of it as some weird thing that we put up and then we worship it, but it's really much deeper than that. Timothy Keller describes worshiping a false idol like this. He says this, what's an idol? It's anything that's really more important to you than God. Anything you put above God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give you. A counterfeit God is anything so central and essential to your life that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living. I have heard people talk like that. He's saying, don't be idolaters and put anything above God. And this group did. 23,000 of them died. What's he talking about? It's another warning. He's talking about Exodus 32. This is when Moses goes up on the mountain of God. He must have been there just a little too long because the people start to get anxious. And so the people come to Aaron, who should know better. I don't know why Aaron did it, but Aaron said, okay, I hear you. They're like, we need a God to worship. We need a God to follow. Can you make us a God? And Aaron goes, give me all your gold. He puts all the gold into a fire, and somehow a calf is formed. They put the calf up, and all the people go, perfect, that's our new God. And they start bringing sacrifices to this new calf made of gold. God's not happy with that situation. He doesn't like that. And to top it off, after they're done, they then get up to indulge in revelry. I already told you what that was. So their new God and the calf of gold and the great big party afterwards, God strikes them with a plague. I can understand. Now, this happens over and over again. The snake story is very similar. The angel of death is very similar. And Paul is telling this Corinth church, this history in Exodus, everything you're reading, it's so you will learn. You will now take and learn from this so you can finish the race well. Chapter 10 is all about finishing the race well. Don't not learn from the history that is filled into this book, telling you all the ways you can mess up. Verse 11, these things happen to them as examples, and they're written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. So if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so you can endure it. Therefore, my dear friends, back to the original point, flee from idolatry. Don't put any other God that's bigger than God. All right, that's the warning he's giving you. In your notes, there's 3 of them. We went over idolatry. That's the first one. Watch out for idolatry. The second one, I don't even think I really need to explain it. Watch out for sexual immorality. Maybe on another day. And then the third one, watch out for grumbling, complaining. It's so interesting to me that this is in here. Idolatry seems really big. Sexual immorality seems really big. And then complaining is on the same level. That's fascinating, right? Is there any complainers in the room? I'm just joking around. Don't answer that. But these are the things he's talking about. These will make us stumble. We don't want to stumble in these areas. St. Augustine has a really interesting quote on this subject. He says, the essence of sin is disordered love. The essence of sin is disordered love. If you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I take this sin and respond to it? Where is idolatry, sexual immorality, and complaining taking over? It's when our love is out of order. How does your love become out of order? All right, I'll give you a simple one first. You have a love of a hobby. All right, you talk about this hobby, like everybody knows you're all about this hobby. It's like the greatest thing in the world. But then when you go to work, you can't turn that off. And so at work, all you can talk about is your hobby. And at first, everyone thinks that's cute. Like, oh yeah, he likes his hobby. And then after a while, they're like, does this guy ever work? Like, all he ever talks about is his hobby. If he had half the love of his job that he did for this hobby, we might actually be able to accomplish something. Now, there are jobs that are really just about paying the rent, right? I know some of us have to take those jobs, but if you're in a job like that where you're just, I don't care about this job at all, I only want to be somewhere else, that'll work for a year, maybe 2 years, but you start to resent that job. You start to become miserable. It's like most of the places I go into, I'm like, wow, everyone's miserable in this job right now. Everyone hates being here. That shows up when our life is out of order. It's not supposed to be that way. Next level, your job compared to your home. Now, if you go from your job and you love it and you have that in order, you're like, okay, there's a point of my life of being here and being a good worker, but you never turn it off. So when you go home, your disordered love is you work all the time, every day. Your spouse knows that you love your job more than they do. It's the breakdown of marriages, the breakdown of family units and relationships, kids. Your kids know that you love your job more than them. They start to even tell you, I didn't know you. All those stories we hear is disordered love. That somehow, somewhere along the way, hobby, work became bigger than home. But there's another level, and it's God. Suddenly, the home is bigger than God. And I see this all the time, especially when I was down south. I think it happens here too, where your life is centered around your home and your kids, and you're going from school to the sport to the club. You've got off-season club, you've got in-season club, you got summer league, you got tournaments all weekend long. And then they'll come to the pastor and they'll say, man, I just don't really feel God. And I'm like, oh, that's because your God is that ball. I don't say that. I don't actually say it. I go, let me pray for you. But that's what it is. You're so disordered love, and none of these are bad. Every single thing I've said is good in the right order. It's only in the essence of the disorder that it becomes a sin. It becomes an idol. Sexual immorality starts to come in. You have all these complaints coming in because you're starting to go, why is my life this way? It's like because you have disordered love. You have to get it all back into order. That's what he's alluding to in this quote. That's what Timothy Keller is alluding to when he said, what's an idol? It's anything that's more important than God, period. It's what Paul's alluding to as he gives 3 huge warnings and continues to say throughout this entire chapter, those are there for you. And if you want to finish well, heed the warnings and put God first. So apply it to your life this morning. In your notes, on your paper, in your journal, where is there disordered love? Is God first? Is all of these things in the right order? And if you're here today and this is all new for you, well, it's probably really out of order. And what you have to do this morning is say, can I put God as the first thing in my life? Romans 3:23 tells us this, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. What that's telling us is that we all had it out of order at some point. There's no one in this room, including myself, that didn't have my order all wrong. But at some point along the way, I go, oh, I get it. I get why the warnings are here. I get why I keep messing up. I get why the temptations of idolatry and sexual immorality and complaining, I get why they're leaking into parts of my life. I have disorder in my love. And I have to put God first. And that's a big step. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. You get to this point where you go, okay, there's a gift from God. Can I accept it? I've had so many people my entire life tell me this is all fake, bunch of religious people, just want your money, whatever. But it's a gift of God to get order right. How do we do it? Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. He tells us how to do it. Confess and believe.